Okay, I'm going to start. So I'm Anthony Patt. I'm a professor of climate policy at ETH Zurich, and I'm the coordinator of the Sentinel project, which has been the primary organizer of this conference. I want to welcome you to the closing session, and I'm just going to say a few words to kick this session off before then really handing it over to other people at the commission and to the organizers of next year's conference. But before I do that, I have a few announcements. First, I'm happy to say that there were 520 total attendees in this conference, which is just a huge number, and it's really amazing. It's amazing, perhaps, what one can do with a virtual conference. Although I think we all enjoy getting together and meeting each other. It seems that virtual conferences allow very large numbers of people to attend, and hopefully people got something out of that. The second announcement is I want to ask you to participate in the whiteboard poll starting right now. In the chat, there should be a link. I'm checking on my own screen. There should be a link to the Miro.com website, which if you click on this, you can then use the zoom function at the lower right-hand side of the window to get an overview of the whiteboard. Grab a sticky note, which are the colorful squares at the bottom, and drag it to the appropriate box and write your comments in the note itself. And it would be great if you could be doing this as this session is going on, because at the end of the session, we're going to go back to what you've written there. The second announcement is, you don't have to do it right now, but at some point, please fill out the feedback form, which is the Google Docs link also put in the chat, or it looks like it hasn't been put in the chat yet, but it will be put in the chat later on. And so I want to ask you to use that feedback form at some point. And then finally, and this is a note from some of the sessions, it looks like the Google Docs thing just got put in the chat. Finally, share the link. Feel free to share the link to the open positions at the JRC in energy transport and climate modeling for policy making. And you can either copy down the link I have here, or maybe Andre will put it into the chat. Okay, so those are some announcements. I want to take a couple minutes just to deliver some of the key messages over the last days. I mean, really, there were too many to mention, but here are some of the few that came out of especially of the plenary sessions. And I need to thank Hans Auer, actually, for having compiled these. The first is that energy system models have played a real role in defining our climate emissions targets, but now they're really beginning to play a key role in allowing us to achieve those targets in ways that are politically, economically, socially, and environmentally feasible. We're going to be really busy over the coming decades as we move from this process of setting our goals to actually implementing things to achieve them. We're going to be having to develop new kinds of energy system models, and we're going to be having to continually updating them as data on how well they work becomes available. A second key message from the first day was that the pandemic had an impact on the energy system. Investment and the prices of renewables proved resilient to the dramatic demand shifts, whereas oil and gas less so. And I think we're seeing this right now with the price of gas really skyrocketing in response to a short-term demand spike. It seems like the time of the phase out for fossil energy sources has likely been advanced. And this again is going to accelerate the need for energy system models that can focus on renewables. On the system architecture side, we saw the huge importance of energy storage. And I'm thinking to a presentation at the first plenary, looking at the Danish energy system with other energy systems around Europe likely being similar. The fact is that with levelized storage costs far higher for renewables than for fossil fuels, models that can capture holistic approaches to manage storage needs are vital. We saw in a presentation how the need for storage can vary by orders of magnitude, depending on how you structure the remainder of your system and take advantage of possibilities that sector coupling offer. So this seemed like a crucial message. On the policy side, we saw also on the first day that models demonstrated the importance of a mix of different instruments, including higher future carbon prices that people need to get used to and need to have firm expectations of, but also technology support and regulatory instruments. And this seemed to be particularly the case in the sectors that are less far advanced than the power generation system at making the transition to low carbon technologies, where you have very high initial price barriers, perhaps too high for carbon prices alone to cover. And then you need these technology support instruments, which gain revenue from either from taxpayers or from the users of the energy services, and direct those to the very small share of the market that the new entrants are accounting for. More in key messages. We saw that to make Europe fit for 55, we need to accomplish a huge amount and quickly. And that means we need models that can provide immediate insights on the issues that policymakers see as most important and pressing, not necessarily the ones that academics find the most interesting. For now, these issues include capacity planning amidst uncertainty and improving both integration and efficiency. But the simple fact is that those are just a couple of the issues, and only the issues that came up right now and over the last few days. We need energy system modelers to be engaged in dialogue processes with policymakers to find out from the policymakers what it is that we ought to be doing. What are the things that we need to be telling them? What are the key variables that we need to be seeing coming out as the results of different scenarios that we may model? We gained insights from 3 workshops on system modeling for climate policy, on high resolution time series processing, and legal aspects of open and closed modeling approaches. And I'm not going to go into any more detail on those, but the simple fact is that within each of those, there's a huge amount of insights to be gained. The energy transmission network, primarily electricity, but also hydrogen, needs to be significantly upgraded. Perhaps most importantly, this transmission network has really long lead times. Part of these are associated with public acceptance. Part of them are associated with building cross-border infrastructure, and simply the fact that you have corridors that you need to secure, and that requires a lot of stakeholders coming on board, both from the public sector and the private sector, and that takes time. And because of that, we need to be developing now the no regret strategies for 2050. We can't be thinking about what we need for the next 10 or 15 years. We need to be thinking, what do we need to be planning now that we know we need out in 2050? And then finally, on the demand side, we need to do a better job disaggregating demand to various end uses, to energy carriers, and thinking about temporal variability with particular attentions to peaks. If we don't pay attention to peaks, we're going to underestimate the supply needs and the transmission needs in order to satisfy demand. And that's crucial. It's crucial to do a better job here if we're going to make sure that energy is secure, which is an absolute bedrock for the European economy. Okay, that's it from my key messages. I'm sure that others can think of many more and highlight those in the whiteboard. If you haven't looked at it now, if you joined after I made this announcement, in the chat, you should see, and maybe Andre could put this again in the chat, because I think people who joined after you first posted it won't see it. There is a Miro.com whiteboard where we'd love it if you could write up post-it notes to put in the appropriate boxes. Okay, before I close, and I'm getting to the close of my presentation, I really want to give a word of thanks to the people who made this possible. And the fact is, there are too many people to mention across the Commission and the research community, but a few stand out. First, I do want to thank Hans Auer from the Open Entrance Project, who worked hard during the conference to compile the key messages. I also need to note that Hans worked tirelessly putting together the special issue from last year's EMP-E conference, which has now made it through into the publication phase. I want to thank the entire Sentinel project team who worked long hours organizing this conference, in particular to thank Andre and Stephanie, who were on board during many of these sessions. And then most especially from the Sentinel project, Laura Booth, who oversaw the huge effort. The participants, you may not have seen a lot of Dr. Booth as she was working, but she was continually working behind the scenes, and she has been working over the last 6 months, long hours, to actually pull this all together. So that's it from my side. Thank you so much to Laura. And now I'm going to hand over to others. First, I want to hand over the remaining hosting of this session to the co-host, William Usher. And then we've got several speakers still to come. So we're going to hear about forthcoming initiatives related to modeling from DG Energy, from Andreas Zucker, and DG Klima from Alben Kitu. Then some concluding remarks and thanks on behalf of the EC from Cinea, from Jasna Rezic. And then finally, handing it over to next year's organizers, the ECEMF project, represented by Johannes Emerling. And he's going to guide us through, including what you're hopefully writing right now on the Miro whiteboard. So that's it for me. I want to thank you so much for participating in this conference. I want to thank most of all Laura for having really led the huge organizational effort to make it possible. And I'm going to stop my screen sharing if I can find the place to put it on my screen, and turn over. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Cool, thank you very much, Anthony. Without further ado, I'll ask Alban to give his intervention, and I'll see you in a minute.
Thanks, William, and thanks, Anthony, for these introductory remarks. So I will start on behalf of the Commission Policy DGs. I'm Alban Kitu from DG Climate Action, and I work in the Economic Analysis and Strategy Unit of DG Klima. And as such, I've been involved in a number of recent initiatives produced by the Commission, including the Fit for 55 package that came out last July, jointly with colleagues of DG NR. So Andreas is here with us, and he will explain a little bit. So thanks for inviting us for this closing session, and for the opportunity to give you a couple of hints and elements on upcoming, policy needs from the modeling perspective. I would like to start thanking colleagues from RTD and Cinea who made that conference possible, and of course colleagues from the Sentinel project that made it a success, as I can see, and from the from the remarks by Anthony, and of course all participants. We made it lively and I think a good exchange in terms of analytics, ideas, and way forwards. So on a few words for upcoming needs from our perspective. As you know, policies in the climate, energy, and transport fields have been historically making an extensive use of quantitative analysis, often model-based, but not only. But anyway, within the Commission, I think these three policy areas have been so far the biggest consumers of this type of material. So of course, we are very interested to see the community being well and lively, and that this EMP-E conference is so successful and keeping going. We can of course expect this to continue in the coming years and decades, as mentioned by Anthony. As I mentioned, and as you know, the new policy package for 2030 is now on the table for political discussions with the Council, meaning member states, and the European Parliament. And we hope for a successful achievement of this new political and policy framework that will bring the EU economy to the agreed 55 target for 2030. But the main, what I think is important for us all here is that 2030, from the especially energy system perspective, it's tomorrow, basically. So the next big policy question for us is what happens the day after tomorrow. How will the different sectors engage into structural changes towards climate neutrality as a whole by 2050? So this is really the big policy questions we have. What comes after 2030? And in fact, for those who are a bit curious and followed recent publications and documents produced, the climate law, which was adopted and published in June 2021, so not so long ago, actually requires the Commission to make a proposal for 2040 GHG reduction target. So I give this as a very concrete milestone and a very concrete policy need on our side. These 2040 targets will have to be based on some impact assessment. And this impact assessment is very likely to make use of modeling outputs, not only, but also modeling outputs. Maybe for those familiar with the international side of the discussion, the international, of the UNFCCC process in particular, the climate law hints at making this proposal somewhere in the first half of 2024. So it's very concrete, and this will come very soon. I may also mention that the climate law is so kind actually to provide a list of dimensions to be considered for this assessment. If you have a look there, you will see elements you're familiar with that relate to energy, but also further elements to be considered in the analysis. In parallel to these very concrete and important milestones for the climate policy framework at EU level, it's of course important to keep monitoring and checking and assessing the question of national action, how to translate EU level targets and objectives into concrete elements, concrete measures. So that's also another element where we think the modeling community can contribute to, and where this type of insights and evidence would be of importance. So to conclude, or to pass the floor to my colleague Andreas, I will just like to stress indeed the critical role of the energy sector in this overall GHG perspective. The energy sector is one of the biggest contributors of GHG emissions, but it's also where a large part of the solution will go through. So to discuss this in further detail, I'll pass the floor to Andreas, that will give you an overview of questions of interest from that specific perspective, which I think is also your core interest. Thank you very much.
Well, many thanks, Alban. So over to you, Andreas.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak in this session. And thanks first to the organizers of this conference, to the projects that organized it, to SINEA and RTD who made it possible, and to all participants who made this such a success. Thank you very much for this, and I hope that many of you who have attended this year will return next year. Now, from the perspective, so you've seen my name, I work for DG NR, and I'm involved, the unit I work with is involved mainly in impact assessments for existing and for upcoming, of course, legal proposals. So the question that is raised is what could be on our agenda. You've seen 14 legal proposals in July, but I might remember that there are still 3 out that will come in December. And one of them is related to creating the necessary conditions for enabling, let's say, the uptake of new gases. New gases meaning hydrogen and biogas, a so-called gas package, which we intend to publish in December. And I believe that there are elements within this package which will be around also in the following years. And that is maybe something for the modeling community to watch immediately, but also what Alban just explained with a view to the 2040, to an energy system in 2040, because if you look at our assessment, but also at the goals that were put put in place for hydrogen. So the Commission issued a hydrogen strategy. Many member states issued one. You will see that the momentum there is really between 2030 and 2040. So this decade, which we have not yet studied so much in detail, apart from being part of a 2050 pathway, is now really getting on our radar. We have the targets for 2030, of course. We will have a lot of discussions there um, with member states, of course. We have the interinstitutional now for our proposals, but the 2030 to 2040 decade is kind of the next thing, and it's not really far away because these, let's say, hydrogen targets, which you might know about the 40 gigawatt and 10 million tons in 2030, would be quite small compared to what would happen. And whether they happen in 2030 or 2031 is not so much the issue, but the dynamics that could result. Now, apart from running long-term models and making pathways, there are a few aspects which could actually gain your interest. One is, of course, as I mentioned, things that we will be starting to work on, and we will make proposals. And this is all related to the question: who should actually, or how a hydrogen economy or an economy with new gases should be run. In terms of assets, in terms of regulation, in terms of rules, who owns assets, but also in terms of the market that would emerge. So that you will see proposals, of course, for some very basic principles that would have to be applied on the European level. But we believe it might not stop there, because the entire question of the energy transition with respect outside of the electricity sector triggers more questions. And that has to do with the international aspects, we believe, and where significant work could still be done would be an understanding how such an industry could become global. Decarbonized gases are, let's say, something which pops up in our models, something which we start to understand, but but it's also something which triggers the interest of development policy makers and actors outside of Europe. What we aim to understand, what some of you are working on, I know that, is to understand what Europe would actually do faced with a, let's say, global energy transition. And here, my theme today, the particular aspect of how a global post-hydrocarbon system for trading new fuels could look like. And I believe it's not only the supply potential, which is maybe the starting point, but also the possible transport routes, infrastructure, options for transportation, costs of different modes, and possible emerging competitions that are interesting. Maybe even a relationship to a slow phase out of hydrocarbon trade. And there, the EU as an actor would be a very interesting question. In particular, whether the EU could become, what we intend, the first market for such fuels, and what this could mean for a global organization of trade. And also related to that, what actually we believe we would be trading. Would it really be hydrogen? Would it be other things? Would it be ammonia? Or how would actually value chains of industry look like in future? Because very much of our thinking is related to existing value chains. So we still think a lot about buying existing products or existing energies, buying specific energies that go into processes with specific value chains. But whether this is a given or not is maybe something to be tested. So this is, I think, an issue which I would very much like to see on one of the next EMP-Es. If it is possible to have it on the next, very happy about that. But it will certainly keep us occupied at DGNR. And hopefully in December, you will be able to learn some of our thinking. And then finally, I have one more issue I find interesting. And this is, of course, the issue that keeps us busy at night this winter, which is a price spike. And I don't mean necessarily a price spike, and it's not the question of whether this is sustainable in the long run or whether you see this in a long-term transition process, because you might not, because in the long run, you might have a reversal to some supply-demand fundamentals. But the very fact that such swings, like the negative oil prices during March 2020 and the extreme prices for gases in winter 2021, the very fact that these exist, it would be interesting to understand whether how that could actually impact a transition, and whether it's possible to capture this somehow in the modeling, what it actually means for the long term. Something which isn't relevant for the long term mathematically if you average out effects, but which definitely could cause, or which might cause, is it delays or different decisions, different paths? Very interesting for us to understand. I think we will discover it, right? We are discovering it right now. But any research on that from an academic perspective would be something we could find very useful. Thank you very much for letting me speak, probably far too long again. Thanks again to all the organizers, and be assured that DGNR will be in next year, and of course support the organizing project, as well as my dear colleagues from SANIA, from RTD, and of course from Klima. Have a very good end of the conference. All the best.
Many thanks, Andreas, and you kept exactly to 10 minutes, so thank you for that. I'm now going to pass the floor to Jasna.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So hello, everybody. My name is Jasna Rešić. I work for the CNEAS. It's the European Climate Infrastructure and Environment Executive Agency. And first of all, I would like to give thanks to the organizers and also my colleagues and all the participants. As you did a great work today, and not only project organizers, but other projects who were closely together working to make this conference as it was. So CNEAS mission is to support stakeholders in delivering on the European Green Deal through high quality program management. So from my side, we are on the project management side, and we manage projects in the energy modeling, such as Open Entrance project. I'm a project manager of this project who organized the last year's conference. I'm also project manager of Sentinel project, who is organized this year, and project ECMF, who will organize next year. So in this conference, we very well understood that there's an important role of energy system modeling, and this is increasing, and how important is modeling for developing energy system policies. We had the chance to see the latest developments in the energy modeling community and discuss several issues that come up in the past few years. And also we discussed how these problems can be solved. And the important thing here is the policy, and getting researchers, policymakers in the industry together and other participants gives us the necessary information to guide us in the way of energy transition and policies needed to go to transform the European energy system. And I would like to thank you for that. You brought the energy modeling community together, and as we've seen in the past conferences, this community is getting bigger and more important. And therefore, topics such as hydrogen decarbonization and similar will be still probably important next year, but also some topics such as adaptation of energy systems and how the energy systems and the modeling will integrate the impacts of climate change, and also issues with social fairness and equity, leaving nobody behind, will be important also. But these and many more topics will be discussed in preparation for the next year conference, and I'm glad that I'll be the part of that with my project ECMF. Also, I would like to say that I like the format of the conference, and hopefully the next year we'll be able to meet in Brussels face to face. But let's see. And at the end, I will thanks everybody again, especially the participants who are part of this community. And I think next year will be bigger and better. And yes, now I can give the word to Will and Johannes from ECMF project to see what's going to happen next year. Thank you.
Many thanks, Jasna and Andreas and Alban. My name's Will Usher. I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction to ECEMF. As Jasna just announced there, we're going to be organising the EMP-E next year. We're very excited to be doing this. I work at KTH, Royal Institute of Technology, and we coordinated the REAM project, which actually was one of the founding partners of EMP-E when it started. And so it's great that we can now organise another EMP-E. So I'm going to take a few minutes of your time to just introduce the ECEMF project, the European Climate and Energy Modelling Forum. And I think that will then give a bit of context when Johannes will take over and talk through the themes that you've identified and some of the ideas that we have for the conference next year. Before I do that, I want to thank Anthony Patt. I realise I didn't thank him earlier, but thank you very much, Anthony. You've led this year's conference very nicely. Supported by your excellent team in the Sentinel project and with contributions from all of the other European projects and the Commission. So congratulations. I think it was a great event, and I think there's some big shoes to fill in following this up. So the European Climate and Energy Modelling Forum it's a Horizon 2020 project. It started in May this year, and we've got 15 partners representing different universities and small to medium enterprises who are very active in the energy and climate modelling fields across Europe. One of the core sort of goals of the project is actually to do something that the EMP-E does very well, which is bring together the European modelling community. And this project was really founded in response to the observation that energy and climate modelling efforts across Europe are fragmented at one level, that there's not enough coordination or collaboration across modelling teams, and that this ends up with a disjointed policy approach. And given the extremely urgent need to come up with policy measures which at the national and European level to meet the climate emergency, then we need a response to this, and uncoordinated research across energy and climate modelling isn't sufficient. And so the aim of the forum is to build sort of one place where energy and climate researchers, analysts and policymakers can all meet, and they can share their experiences in modelling, share data, and build links across the sub-communities in the energy and climate fields. And with a sort of commitment to open science and transparency, of course, in line with the best practices. And the other thing we really want to build is a continuous dialogue around energy research and policy. And this was highlighted in Anthony's opening speech of this closing session. Basically coming up the old process of doing some research and publishing it in a special issue to answer a policy question isn't really valid anymore. We need a continuous dialogue between policymakers and researchers to meet the urgency of the transition to climate neutrality. So then the goal of the forum is to, or another goal is to present a more coherent and unified evidence base. And this requires high quality research, it requires excellent models, and also this strong community that work together and help build then this evidence base. And then we need to actually communicate these insights that we obtain from such activities and communicate these to policymakers. I'll get on to the actual activities that we'll be conducting in the project in a moment. But I wanted to highlight a few sort of tensions that this brings up, and I think these aren't necessarily new; they're quite old actually. But there sort of these tensions on timescales. Policy making requires sort of immediate answers, and in academia, we work on sort of longer timescales, developing models, identifying research questions, developing models and methods to answer those research questions, and publishing papers. But we need to provide answers urgently and quickly in response to questions. And they're needed by policymakers. These types of robust insights are needed by policymakers to formulate these very complex and comprehensive policies required to then meet the climate challenges. There's a tension between rigor and relevance. I guess I've just talked about that a bit. You know, we need to provide quick answers that are policy relevant, but we need to do that with sufficient depth. We need to answer policy questions, but we also need academic independence. We want to challenge and provoke policymakers and other stakeholders, and not just answer questions which they think are important. So there's important, and then we need to think about sort of the incentives as academics to publish with and the tension between that and the need for policy to require prompt answers. So how do we incentivize ourselves to contribute to this policy-making process? So to get involved, we're conducting a model comparison exercise, so a comprehensive package of research is at the center of the project, looking at the transition to climate neutrality in Europe. This includes conducting a formal sort of model comparison exercise. We'll be publishing a protocol for diagnostic scenarios soon. So if you're interested, you can pick this up and have a look at how you could get involved through running these diagnostic scenarios and contributing to the project that way. And we'll be publishing the full sort of model comparison protocol where we'll look into transitions into to climate neutrality in Europe in the later stages of the project. We conduct events, so we've just conducted our first research policy workshop, and this will on energy demand, and this will be followed up with a whole program of research policy workshops where we bring together researchers and policymakers to co-create the sort of key research questions to help drive our research agenda in the project. And we'll also be running training workshops on how to do a model comparison or get involved in that. And of course, we're organising next year's EMP-E. You can collaborate with us on open tools and open data and tools to support this model comparison exercise. So building on existing tools such as the YASA Scenario Explorer and the Open Entrance Nomenclature. We'll be developing visualization tools and scripts for converting between data formats to help with this, and publishing open licensed training material. And later this year, or maybe early next year, we'll contact you if you're part of a Horizon Europe or Horizon 2020 project to discuss opportunities for cross-project collaboration. And this is our Twitter account, so do follow us, ECEMF_2020, and sign up to our newsletter our quarterly newsletter on our website, ecemf.eu. Or you can contact us via email. Okay, so I'll hand over now to Johannes.
Thanks, Phil. Yes, you can just keep clicking the slides. Yeah,
okay.
Thanks. My name is Johannes Emerling. I'm a researcher at EAE and also working on the community building aspect of the ECMF. And as Will just said, I mean, given that our mission is very related to the EMP-E, we're very happy to host next year's EMP-E. When it comes to potential topics or themes, I mean, of course, there, as we have heard already, quite some interesting ones from the Commission. These were a few ones that that we had at the beginning and also during the project start of the ECMF. Is of course looking at different pathways to climate neutrality, still from the EU, but also global perspective. Also, I think the idea of further continue building the European modeling community, that is including European models, a lot of global models that have been also presented this workshop, but also including national or even regional modeling communities and researchers. I think this kind of bridging activity is something that we really try to focus on within the project, and that could also be an interesting research topic for next year's workshop, especially also linking, comparing, validating, for instance, national and European modeling, which is, I think, a big need here. The next slide, just another few more sectoral topics, was a bit related to also what Andreas before said, is of course the pandemic continues, but also in general any kind of disruptive social or any kind of disruptive event happens. We've seen a lot on that already here, but I think there's going to be the general topic of what can happen, trying to understand also in more extreme scenarios might be interesting to look at. And on top also, of course, see what after all the data comes out over the next year, what is the outcome of COVID-19 will be interesting. There was also during the whole workshop, I think, a lot of more detail on demand modeling. Can be improved, especially, for instance, I mean, in the building sector, even though there's quite some advancement, but I think the detail here is still, there's a lot of things that can be done at a higher resolution, different dimensions, or also international transport, for instance, also, I think, an important topic. Another topic that also I've seen it come up also already in Miro, where we're going to move in a second, was the role of climate impact, climate modeling, climate impacts and adaptation, and how to link this to the mitigation challenge, which is also starting now. We see more and more work in this direction, but I think also at the EMP-E that can be interesting to have this as a specific topic. And to finish, yes, as Will said, we focus a lot on transparency, open access to models, and then also deriving robust insights, including based on model comparisons, model diagnostics, and all these kind of exercises to see how validate models actually are. So I think this is also something that we would we think can be interesting for many modelers, and we can try to propose something along these lines. With that being said, I think it would be best to take the next 10-15 minutes just to look at actually all the input of all you here. And let's maybe, if you can share the screen. I already had a look, and thanks a lot for all these many comments, which really make it a very colorful source of ideas for the next meeting list. When going through this, I think already a couple of themes or let's say aggregation points stem out. I mean, one on the technology or supply side, especially hydrogen, the role of the grid and storage. So that seems to be one key theme or a topic of interest for many of you. A second topic that came out from my reading is also the kind of just transition and social dimension of especially energy transition. So what does it imply in terms of just transition sustainability in a kind of broader multidimensional concept of sustainability. Yeah, also as I just said, the role of climate modeling, linking it, going beyond just the energy system towards including feedback effects from the climate system, adaptation or climate impacts in general. That might be something that seems relevant. And one aspect I think is also interesting is the role of co-creation of knowledge, policy, stakeholder involvement. And yeah, how to improve the interface, including from private sector actors or consultants and academia, which I think is one really great feature of the EMP-E, which brings together academia, but also related fields. And this might be also something interesting. And maybe also just to mention on the session formats, of course, this year it had to be all virtual. It's really great to see that the skills workshops were really all over the place, appreciated a lot. So I think a heads up to all the people that dedicated time to really have these very useful and work intensive workshops to be together, especially physically, non-physically. And the final point that I find also interesting was to involve more societal actors. Yeah, there was even an idea to invite someone from Fridays for the Future, or other civil society actors to next year's EMP-E. Yeah, with that being said, we are happy to also have a discussion. So if any one of the panelists maybe having a look at what's going on, of course, it's continued to be written. Please, you can also have your impression on what people have been writing. I think in case even if someone of the audience wants to speak up.
Yeah, I suggest if you want to make an intervention, just put up your hand using the reactions button you should see at the bottom of your screen. This is just a normal open Zoom meeting, so you should be able to then just unmute yourself. Hi, Danielle. I see you have your hand up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Hi, I've also thanks on behalf of DG Research and Innovation to the organizers and participants, but I also wanted to reiterate my wish to have technology innovation made more endogenous into your models. Since we all know that a large chunk of CO2 emission reductions by 2050 will have to come from technologies that are not beyond the demonstration stage now. I mean, we can't afford to postpone dealing with this issue anymore. And I am open to talk to you on whether you think there are ways that the Commission could support making more data available in this regard. Because I know the issue here is the data and also econometric analysis that should come with the parameters that you need in your models. So feel free to reach me out if you have any ideas. We're just exploring how to further support new data sets made available for you in the future. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Danielle. Are there any other questions or suggestions? Are there any strong feelings that we've missed something maybe on the mirror board? Andreas, you've got your hand up?
Yes, when I look at the left panel of the mirror board, I just wonder, following up on my colleague Alban from Klima, whether, I don't know, the year 2040 could not be a focus theme. So, because, you know, we talked about 2030 all the time. We talk about 2050, of course. And as my colleague explained, 2040 will be a year to study in future. Yeah, indeed.
Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left of the session. So in a moment, we're going to do a photo, and we'll ask everyone to turn on their videos and take a screenshot. So last chance really to make any comments or thanks or observations about this year's EMP-E and ideas for next year. Otherwise, we'll be in touch with you soon. As I said, Johannes will be reaching out to the other European projects towards the end of the year. And we're always keen to hear your ideas and input. You can contact us via the ECEMF website, or the email info@ecmf.eu, or to ping us on Twitter and so on, and we'll be in touch. Great. So if I could ask everyone, if you're happy to do so, to turn on your video, and we'll do a big screenshot of all the participants. Great. It's looking good. Okay, who's pressing the shutter button?
I did one, and Andre too, right?
Yes, more than one.
Good. It looks beautiful. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Yeah. Smile, everyone. Great. So yeah, thanks very much, everyone. Thanks very much again to Anthony, to Laura, Stephanie, and the whole rest of the Sentinel team, and also to everyone at the Commission. It's been a really great 3 days rather, and yeah, I look forward to seeing you at next year's event, if not before.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a nice day.
Thank you, William. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.